You're filling out a form. Somewhere near the top, it asks for your species. Okay, it doesn't actually ask that. But imagine it did. You wouldn't even pause. You'd write human without thinking, because obviously, there's only one kind. Human is human. It's the most obvious box on the entire form. Except that obvious box is a trick of history. Because for almost the entire existence of humanity, that question would have had more than one right answer. There wasn't one kind of human. There were several, different species of human, alive at the same time, walking the same planet, sometimes the same valley. And if you'd been born in the right place 100,000 years ago, you might have looked across a river and seen a person who was not your species looking back. So here's the question. Why are we the only human species left? What happened to all the others? And the answer is one of the strangest, most unsettling stories in the history of life. Because we didn't just win. We were the last ones standing in a family that used to be full. Let me show you how crowded it used to be. Go back a few 100,000 years, and the world had a whole cast of humans in it. In Europe and Western Asia, there were the Neanderthals, stocky, powerful, cold-adapted, with brains as big as ours or bigger. In Asia, there were the Denisovans, a group so mysterious we've basically only identified them from DNA and a handful of bones. On an island in Indonesia, there was Homo floresiensis, tiny, barely 3.5 feet tall, nicknamed the Hobbit. In the Philippines, another small species, Homo luzonensis. In South Africa, Homo naledi. And Homo erectus, the great survivor, had been kicking around Asia for over 1 million years. That's not a sequence. That's the key thing people get wrong. These weren't steps on a ladder, one turning into the next. They were all around at once. Cousins, not ancestors. For most of the time humans have existed, being human meant being one of several options. And the world we live in now, the one where there's just us, alone, the only human left, is actually the weird exception. It's brand new. It's only about 40,000 years old. So what happened? How did a planet full of different humans narrow down to just one? The honest answer, right up front, is that scientists still argue about this. There's no single smoking gun. But there are several powerful forces, and they most likely worked together. Let's go through them, because each one tells you something about why you specifically are the one still here. The first one is the big one. It's not about strength, or brains, or weapons. It's about your social network. Here's the thing. Neanderthals were not stupid. That old cartoon of the dumb brute dragging a club is just wrong. They made tools, controlled fire, buried their dead, cared for their sick, probably had language of some kind. Brain size-wise, they had us matched. So intelligence alone doesn't explain why they're gone and we're here. What was different was how we lived. Homo sapiens lived in big, connected webs of people. Groups traded with other groups. Ideas moved between them. If someone 100 miles away figured out a better way to make a spear point, or start a fire, or sew a warm coat, that knowledge could travel across the whole network, from group to group, until everyone had it. We were plugged in. Neanderthals weren't. They lived in small, scattered, isolated bands, tight-knit, but cut off. And that turns out to be a fatal weakness, even if you're smart. Because when your group is isolated, every clever invention lives and dies with the handful of people who thought of it. There's no network to spread it through. A brilliant idea in one Neanderthal valley never reached the next one. They kept having to reinvent the wheel, alone, over and over. So picture it like this. 2 equally smart species. But one of them shares everything across a giant web of people, and the other one keeps it all locked in tiny separate rooms. Give that a few thousand years. And the connected one pulls ahead so far it's not even a contest. We didn't outsmart the Neanderthals moment to moment. We out-networked them across generations. Our advantage wasn't the individual brain. It was all the brains, wired together. That's the first force. The second one is darker, and it's the one people don't expect. We didn't necessarily kill them all. We absorbed some of them. Here's the proof, and it's sitting inside your own body. If you have roots outside of Africa, you are, right now, carrying Neanderthal DNA. Around 2% of the genome of most Europeans and Asians is Neanderthal. And people in Melanesia carry up to 5% Denisovan DNA. That's not a metaphor. That's a fact of your cells. At some point, your ancestors and these other human species met, and they had children, and those children survived and had children of their own, all the way down to you. Which changes what the word extinction even means here, because some of these species may not have simply died out. They may have been swallowed. Think about the numbers. Homo sapiens were spreading fast and in huge numbers. The Neanderthal population was small, maybe never more than a few tens of thousands across all of Europe. Now take a small population, and every generation some of them pair off with the flood of newcomers instead of with each other. Their distinct group gets diluted a little more each time, fewer pure Neanderthals breeding with Neanderthals, more of their genes flowing into the sapiens ocean. Run that forward, and you don't need a war. You don't need a massacre. The Neanderthals could disappear as a separate people simply by being folded into us, one child at a time, until there was no separate them left, just a faint signature in the DNA of the people who remained. A recent theory argues exactly this, that interbreeding itself, by pulling Neanderthals into sapiens groups, quietly drained the Neanderthal population until it couldn't sustain itself. They didn't all fall to spears. Some of them just became us. But the third force is where the sadder truth lives, because a lot of these species were already fragile long before we showed up. Take the Neanderthals again. Their populations were small, spread thin, and low on genetic diversity. There's evidence of inbreeding, of communities barely hanging on at the edge of survival. When you're a small, scattered species living hand-to-mouth in a harsh Ice Age world, you have no cushion. No backup. One bad stretch, a few failed hunts, a hard winter, a disease, and a whole group can blink out, with no one nearby to refill it. Now bring in Homo sapiens, arriving in large numbers, wanting the same caves, the same hunting grounds, the same prey. You don't even need open conflict. You just need competition. Two species fishing from the same pond, and one of them is already barely staying afloat. The sapiens didn't have to defeat the Neanderthals in battle. They just had to be there, using the same resources, tipping an already precarious species over the edge. And then there's disease. When two populations that have been separated for hundreds of thousands of years suddenly meet, they trade germs. And each side is defenseless against illnesses the other has lived with for ages. We've seen this play out in recorded history, again and again, when isolated populations meet newcomers and get devastated by diseases they'd never encountered. The same thing may have hit the Neanderthals and Denisovans. Illnesses the incoming sapiens carried without much trouble could have torn through populations that had no resistance at all. Stack it all together, and you start to see the real shape of it. It wasn't one thing that ended them. It was everything at once. They were already living on a knife's edge. Small, isolated, inbred, vulnerable. Then a larger, faster breeding, better networked species showed up and competed for their land, bred with them and diluted them, and possibly carried diseases that finished the job. Some were absorbed, some starved out, some sickened. Different species in different places probably went out for different reasons. But the pattern was the same everywhere. One by one, they disappeared, until the whole crowded family of humans had emptied out to a single survivor. Us. Now here's the part worth sitting with, because it flips the whole story on its head. We like to tell ourselves we're here because we were the best, the smartest, the strongest, the chosen endpoint of evolution. But that's not really what the evidence says. We were smart, yes, we were well connected, yes, but we were also lucky. We were the species that happened to have the bigger network when it mattered, the bigger numbers when it counted, the right position when the climate lurched and the diseases spread. Change a few rolls of the dice, and maybe it's a Neanderthal filling out that form, wondering what happened to the strange, tall, thin humans that used to live across the river. And this connects to something you've probably felt without knowing why. That flicker of unease around things that look almost human but aren't quite right. A too-real doll, a wax figure, a face that's just slightly off. There's a theory that this feeling is a leftover from exactly this era, from a time when the thing across the river really was almost human, when almost us was a real category of being, and telling the difference could matter. We may be carrying the ghost of that world in our instincts, long after the other humans vanished. Because they did vanish. Every single one of them. The powerful Neanderthals, the mysterious Denisovans, the tiny hobbits of Flores, the whole magnificent, varied family of humans that once filled the earth, gone, until only one branch was left holding the entire name. So the next time you write human on a form without thinking, remember that it used to be a much bigger word. It used to mean a whole family of different people, spread across the world, each of them as real and alive as you are right now. We're not the only kind of human, because we're the only kind there could ever be. We're the only kind left, because we're the ones who made it through. and every other way of being human is gone, except for the small, quiet fragments of them still riding along inside your own blood.